Superbad almost never got made. It took over a decade to get funded, and when it finally did, everything started going wrong. Cast members hated each other, one of its stars seriously considered quitting acting altogether, and it sparked controversy that's still being debated today. Yet somehow, all this chaos is exactly why the movie worked. Who would have guessed that one of the biggest teen comedies of all time was written by 13-year-olds? That's right, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg began writing Superbad at the age of 13.
Me and Evan started writing Superbad when we were like 13 or 14 years old.
But that's exactly why the movie works so well. They would rewrite the script all throughout high school, and you can't get anything more authentic than a high school movie that was literally written by high schoolers.
We'd never seen a movie that really was about what we were experiencing in high school, which basically trying to get alcohol and trying to have sex. We'd seen movies that kind of touched on those subjects, but never in the way that we found realistic.
It was based on their lives, with virtually every character being someone they knew personally.
Almost every name you hear in the movie is someone we went to high school with.
Including Seth and Evan, who were based on themselves, and Fogel, who was a friend of theirs.
Well, today we're on the set of Superbad, and there's a very, very special guest today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the real Fogel.
Hello.
And several of the scenes in the movie actually happened in real life, including the period blood sequence.
Period blood also happened. We were at a high school dance. We were in the locker room afterwards. It essentially played out almost exactly like how it does in the movie.
While the script was genius, especially for two high school stoners, it was an incredibly long road to getting made.
We've been working on this movie for like 12 years now. I spent half my life writing this movie.
In fact, the wait was so long that Seth Rogen assumed the movie would never get made.
I mean, that's what's so weird about it is I had really resigned to the fact that it was never going to get made.
And honestly, he had every reason to believe this, which is insane considering what the movie became. They knew they had something really special going, and yet they were ready to just give up. It really makes you wonder about how many great comedies there were over the years that just never ended up getting made. But after about a decade, the project would finally gain momentum when Judd Apatow attached himself to the project. You know, the guy who produced and or directed so many of the great comedy hits of this century, like Anchorman, 40-Year-Old Virgin, and Step Brothers. Finally, it looked like things were about to change for the better. Him and Seth met on Freaks and Geeks, really hit it off, and there was finally real hope that Superbad would become a movie. But Judd didn't have the success he had hoped for, because even he couldn't get it greenlit. Despite being the most credible man in comedy, studios still told him no. It was starting to feel like a hopeless venture, until they finally got the big break they needed. After countless rejections, Judd finally got a big-time producer on the project. The producer would actually soon become the head of a studio, and it looked like the dream was finally coming true. But there was a major problem.
A producer joined us because we thought maybe we're not powerful enough, so we got this powerful producer, and the first decision he made as the head of the studio was to not make the movie.
This is really where it felt like any hope of the movie getting made died, because if this didn't feel like an absolute death blow, I don't know what would. Greg Batola said this was because nobody thought an R-rated comedy could make money.
Everyone was saying, we don't want to do an R-rated comedy. Yeah, this script is good, but R-rated comedies, like, why would we make a movie where the people with the audience it's for can't come see it?
Doesn't that sound strangely familiar to modern times? Years passed without progress, until the success of the film Talladega Nights would change everything.
Other movies started succeeding, like Talladega Nights and things that I was working on. People said, what else do you have? And so we had a trunk of rejected projects.
I mean, just think of how absurd that is. Superbad was a straight up rejected script, and the movie only ever saw the light of day because of Apatow's success producing another film. But just like that, after years upon years of rejection, Superbad was finally given the go-ahead. And what started as a dream for two teenagers was about to become Hollywood reality. Greg Batola, who had only directed one feature film in his life, The Day Trippers, which was made over a decade prior, would come on as director after meeting both Judd and Seth on the television show Undeclared. A decision that Judd viewed as being the reason for why the movie turned out so great.
But I sent it to Greg, who, one of my favorite directors, and I loved The Day Trippers, and he really made the movie 100 times better than we ever thought it would be.
And now it was time to assemble the cast who would forever go down as legends. But this was actually an incredibly grueling endeavor, and one that went nowhere near the way anyone would have expected. This is where things really started to get messy, because at every turn there was a new set of drama, and nothing just seemed to work out. Seth Rogen had planned to play the role of Seth all along. I mean, he literally wrote the character after himself, but Father Time had other plans.
I was going to play Seth, and the real Evan has no interest in acting. It basically took us so long to get the movie made that I aged out of the role.
So that really left them in quite the pickle. I mean, who could play you? better than yourself. So they really struck out trying to find a replacement. Jonah Hill really wanted the role, but they just did not believe in him.
And Jonah, actually, we refused to kind of acknowledge as an individual who even could audition. We were just like, oh, you look too old.
And so they almost completely missed out on him. But after numerous attempts, and shaving his face, they finally let him audition while they were filming the movie Knocked Up.
I don't know, Evan. I don't follow your moment-to-moment whereabouts like your fucking life partner, Fogel.
And it was strong enough that he convinced them he was right for the role, which was great. But it only gave them half the equation, and it left them with a new daunting task, because they needed an equally strong Evan to play opposite.
Hey, if you said we were gonna burn our dicks off and I didn't do it, that's not bailing, because that's self-preservation.
Which Apatow said they loved Michael Cera immediately.
He loved Michael Cera, as did Seth and Evan, and we were just all in love with him.
Evan Goldberg even said they cast him with a snap of a finger.
Michael Cera walked in and was just like, done.
Yeah.
Though Michael Cera's recount of the audition process was literally the exact opposite of what both Apatow and Evan said. So I mean, who knows?
It was sort of this like long audition process. I felt I had to keep proving myself.
But without question, the most insane casting story of the whole movie was still ahead. You might be wondering about how McLovin was cast, and you won't be disappointed, because this was one hell of a journey.
How old are you, McLovin?
Old enough
Old enough for what?
to party.
Put simply, despite Hollywood being home to millions of super talented actors, they kept striking out. They could not find anyone to pull off the role, and it got to the point of causing a damn near mental breakdown for the team.
We were like anxiety attacks and nervous breakdowns when it came to Fogel. We just could not find a Fogel.
Yeah.
And he walked in, walked out, and we're just like hugging each other.
Yeah, we were so
high-fiving.
he had no idea how happy we were.
Which led to them thinking outside the box. They began rapid-firing emails to high schools across the country, and they were fortunate enough to have sent one to the high school of Christopher Mintz-Plasse.
And I guess they've been looking for this role, Fogel, for a really long time. So they sent emails, like I guess people at school that work at schools that were like, we're looking for this part, like a nerdy character kind of thing. And my friend's mom works at a school. You look like you could fit the part, so why not just come down with us? So I went with two of my friends and I got the part.
But what makes all this more insane is that Christopher was not a trained screen actor. Like, he was just a high school student. 0 feature films, short films, or even student films under his belt. He was a complete novice. And if you don't believe me, just look at his filmography. And so he'd audition, nail his performance, and land debatably the most iconic comedy supporting role of all time. But there was one major problem that almost prevented all of this from ever happening. Jonah Hill absolutely hated Christopher and tried to do whatever he could to make sure he wasn't cast in the movie.
Is it true that Christopher Mintz-Plasse pissed off Jonah Hill during the audition? Is there a story there?
Definitely. When he left the room, Jonah was like, no, not him. I think he felt that Chris was like kind of getting the better of him comedically, stopping Jonah, like blocking Jonah's like funny jabs, which made it so funny.
Which really made their audition together particularly interesting. If you watch the tape, tension is clearly building between Jonah and Christopher as it progresses, until this moment happens.
I don't like you at all.
That's okay, I don't like you.
That line's not in the script or in the final movie. And I know you can say it was ad-libbed, and yeah, it was. But when you know the backstory and you read his body language, that line feels a little too real. But to their better judgment, they did ignore Jonah, and they went with Christopher. And thank goodness, because he was just made for this role.
Muhammad is the most commonly used name on earth. Read a fucking book for once.
And ironically, the tension between the two of them just made their on-screen dynamic that much better. They rounded out the cast with amazing actresses in Emma Stone, Martha McIsaac, and Aviva Bowman, which they said was not particularly difficult to do.
The girl casting process, there's a lot more talented girls out there than guys, apparently, because finding them really wasn't that stressful.
Yeah, Emma kind of walked in and we were like, sweet.
And I've noticed this myself as someone who casts his own movies. There's about 1 talented male actor for every 10 talented actresses. And that's not hyperbole. Something you may not know is that just like Christopher Mintz-Plasse, this was Emma Stone's first film role as well. Pretty nuts that 2 rookies really helped carry a film as iconic as Superbad. So after a decade of rejection, near cancellation of the film, and a taxing casting process, I guess the moral of the story is, good things come to those who wait. But things were about to get real. A bunch of inexperienced actors and writers, and a second-time film director, were now tasked with making a $20 million studio comedy. Even if the decision of several studios to turn the movie down seemed idiotic, it at least kind of made sense that they were so hesitant, given how unproven everyone was at this point. Because on paper, this did look like a disaster waiting to happen. And honestly, 9 times out of 10, these movies do end up being disasters. To add to the uncertainty, the cast really didn't know each other prior to filming.
None of us knew each other. Well, me and Jonah were acquainted before.
We had
the movie,
met
but
like
yeah,
once or twice.
We never really hung out.
Which is problematic when you remember these guys were supposed to be best friends in the movie. And if that didn't feel real, you never would have bought into the movie. Chemistry is everything when you're playing lifelong best friends. But they'd slowly become best friends throughout the rehearsal process. And apparently Jonah's vendetta against Christopher would pass.
I think it was most important that we just hang out and get to know each other so that we were all very familiar when it came time to film, you know?
And that ended up being way more important than it sounds. This was key to getting the performances as strong as they were. Not just for the reasons already mentioned, but because there was something unique going on with this movie. And I noticed this as well when I read the screenplay. It wasn't as ridiculous as it was with Wedding Crashers, where I literally couldn't even recognize the movie, but there was clearly a lot of improv going on with this movie.
But how much of that is actually full-on word-for-word scripted, and how much of it is like, boys, just go for it?
Yeah, there weren't too many word-for-word things where, I mean, there were certain jokes that were very well-worded and scripted, but we were always encouraged to say whatever we want.
And you don't get any of that magic if the guys hadn't become friends in real life. Everything was running surprisingly smoothly on the cast side of things, but the studio had Judd Apatow on as head producer, looking for any issues that would come up. It really is as serious as if one thing's off, it could end up damaging the entire movie. So having a veteran like Apatow on set is exactly what this production needed. I mean, anyone who's ever been on a film set knows nothing ever goes according to plan, but Superbad seemed to be the rare occasion where everything did go according to plan, thanks to Apatow's secret weapon in Greg Mottola.
I just go to where the trouble is, and sometimes there isn't much trouble. You know, when we did Superbad, Greg Mottola just crushed it as the director. And
there was one area where the vibe on set really could have gotten killed, and I can tell you as a director, I would have hated to have had to deal with this. But as you know, Christopher Mintz-Plasse was in high school when they filmed this and was only 17 years old, meaning by law, his mom had to be with him on set at all times, including his bedroom scene.
So you were, 17 then when you were shooting the film?
Yeah.
So does that mean you have to have your parents on set, like, legally?
Yes, there were legal issues, so when I did my sex scene, my mom had to be on set.
But it seemed to go really well for all involved.
Finished a long day of simulated sex scenes with Christopher Mintz-Plasse and the lovely Aviva. And besides feeling a little like I'm a creep for directing that, they did a wonderful job.
And that really seemed to be the story all around this production. Everything that should have killed this movie ended up becoming a strength. The cast had the time of their lives on this set.
The most fun I've ever had on set, ever.
Hanging around with the guys, on set has been really great.
It was awesome. I mean, it was just nonstop laughs.
Unbelievable working with them. I mean, it was just like, it was constant fun and just hanging out and jokes nonstop.
It was just like hanging out with like really good people.
But don't just take their word for it. You can really see how much fun they had when you watch the blooper reels.
You do that again, you said the F word.
Did I really?
Yeah, you want to be.
Oh, it's right there, dude. P and for G, okay? This is the one night we're fucking.
Sorry.
USA up all night. 4 ounces. I know that. 4 ounces into your hand.
You can actually feel it in every scene, and that's a key component to why this movie works so well. It's really a beautiful thing, because I've been on set when no one's having fun, and it, really sucks. Against all odds, everything came together. The cast found their chemistry, the improv was so strong that it dominated the actual movie, and the production ran so smoothly that you would have thought everyone involved had been 30-year veterans in the industry. But the moment of truth was coming. You can have all the fun you want, but if audiences didn't show up, then none of it would have mattered. Would the studio regret its decision to fund the movie? Because the brutal reality of filmmaking is that you can spend an entire decade making a movie, but it can fail entirely because of one weekend. There have been plenty of instances where the cast had a great time making the movie, but then that same energy just didn't translate to the audience. Prior to its release, Jonah Hill shared a very candid hope that people would actually like the movie.
I just really hope people like Superbad. It's something that we really enjoy, so we just hope other people enjoy it.
Before its release, they did test screenings, and Greg Mottola shared a surprising experience at the first test screen.
And it went incredibly well. And I was sitting with Bill Hader, and Bill nudged me and said, look at the girls behind us, and they were like holding each other and crying at the end of the film.
Him and the cast were really taken aback by how well the film tested, but Mottola firmly believes it was a case of right place, right time, and that they really lucked out that it had been several years since we had gotten a great teen comedy like this.
Of that nobody was making R-rated teen movies anymore.
Right, yeah.
They'd all become like PG-13.
It was finally time to premiere, and the anxiety of whether the positive test screenings would translate to the box office was real. Testing well with audiences that the movie is specifically made for, and getting the public at large to show up, are two incredibly different things. And for the cast, this was the moment they had been waiting for their whole lives. Something that every aspiring actor dreams of, but very few get to experience. Not only was it the first movie for Emma and Christopher, it was also the biggest production that most of the cast and crew had ever been a part of. Bill Hader recounted how surreal the experience was sitting with Emma and her mom.
Time I had ever seen myself on screen, and I went to an advanced screen of Superbad, and I sat in the back with Emma Stone and her mom, and we were just looking at each other going, can you believe we're in a movie?
But it turns out they really didn't have anything to worry about, because the movie didn't just succeed. It opened to $33 million and would absolutely obliterate its $20 million budget, bringing in a total of $170 million at the box office, with another $140 million from DVD sales. It wasn't just successful, it was one of the biggest teen comedy hits of all time. Audiences ate it up, and critics shockingly did too. There aren't too many R-rated comedies from this era that critics seem to love, and even fewer that critics loved more than the audiences. But this was one of them, getting an 88% with critics on Rotten Tomatoes and an 87% with audiences. It was just one of those movies that completely took over our culture. I was 8 years old when this movie came out, so I didn't see it the first time around, but I remember it constantly being referenced at school, at family gatherings, and even on ESPN. I even remember kids wearing those McLovin shirts. You actually still see them here and there today. Like, this movie has just become completely unavoidable. First time I ever saw this movie was my freshman year of college. I remember it was like 1 a.m. I was at my friend Austin's apartment, and I was getting ready to go home. I had an 8 a.m. calc lecture in the morning, which, thinking about it now, like, this is just absolutely wild because I can't even function without 9 hours of sleep. But I digress. I remember he said, "You ever see Superbad?" I was like, "No." And he popped the movie and we stayed up another 2 hours, and it was just fucking legendary. It was so great that I've made an effort to watch this movie at least once a year every year since. It seemed like everything that could have gone right with Superbad did. But that wasn't the end of the story, because after all of its success, things started to take a serious turn, and often not in the right direction. Given the mainstream effect of Superbad, both Christopher and Michael recounted not being able to go into public without being recognized.
Popular, and I was so recognizable suddenly, and so were all of us, and it's a strange adjustment to make.
Which sounds really cool on the surface, but it really became too much. Like, so much that Michael Cera considered completely quitting acting, saying fame makes you very uncomfortable in your own skin and makes you paranoid and weird. When you're a kid, people also feel like they can kind of grab you. They're not that respectful of you or your physical space. There was a point where I wanted to stop taking jobs that would make me more famous. I really didn't know if I was going to keep being an actor. I mean, think about that. The success of this movie was so big that it almost became the reason why one of the stars of the film left the industry entirely. For Greg Mottola, he never really felt the same magic ever again, and views Superbad as the peak of his career.
At the time, I thought I may never experience this thrill again, and that's remained true.
And he was even given the opportunity of a lifetime thanks to this movie, but he squandered it. Because of Superbad's commercial and critical success, Judd Apatow approached him about directing the blockbuster Bridesmaids, but he ultimately turned it down for another movie.
Possibly direct Bridesmaids. And I was trying to get Adventureland set up. And because I am an indie at heart, I decided to pursue Adventureland.
But the aftermath wasn't all bad. Apatow said that Pineapple Express was literally only made because of the success of Superbad.
It was Pineapple Express, which was only written because we couldn't believe anyone, there was no one to make Superbad. And so we were like, what's more commercial than Superbad? Oh, we could do like a stoner action movie.
The ripple effect of this movie was massive. And Michael Cera, he didn't give up acting after all, and instead he made a name for himself through the likes of Juno, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, among others. Jonah Hill would transform into a straight-up A-lister, becoming a staple of comedy movies through Funny People, 21 Jump Street, and Wolf of Wall Street, while also crossing genres with the likes of Moneyball and War Dogs, which is also one of the only 6 movies I've ever given a 10 out of 10 to on IMDb. The rookies would make names for themselves as well, with Christopher Mintz-Plasse following Superbad with role models, Kick-Ass, How to Train Your Dragon, and Trolls, just to name a few. Though nobody in the cast had a more insane career trajectory than Emma Stone, who went from this being her film debut to becoming a stable in comedy through Easy A, Zombieland, and The House Bunny, to straight up winning Oscars for performances in La La Land and Poor Things. But the story didn't end here, because years later, in more sensitive circles, the film would face some real backlash. The language used in the film has been viewed as offensive to some, but the cast viewed it as being honest, authentic high school dialogue.
Very candid with your friends.
Right, I think it's more of, just not like sugarcoating things. It's not as much as cursing, or that's how people talk as well, but like, you don't really think of a clever, non-offensive way to say something to your friend. You just kind of say it.
Seth Rogen, on the other hand, has questioned his writing, saying there's for sure some stuff in our earlier movies, and even in our more recent ones, where even like a year later you're like, maybe that wasn't the greatest idea. There are probably some jokes in Superbad that are bordering on blatantly homophobic at times. They're all in the voice of high school kids who do speak like that, but I think we'd also be silly not to acknowledge that we also were, to some degree, glamorizing that type of language in a lot of ways. Though Apatow has held firm on his stance.
I don't know if I went around with Superbad today, if people would go, you can't do that now. Maybe they would make it, maybe they wouldn't. I don't know, but I know I'm proud of what it says.
And yeah, I mean, I'm on the side of this just being genuine and authentic dialogue. I mean, for the past decade, Hollywood's really tried to strip the honesty away from movies and instead replace it with the utopian view of people who live on Reddit. But that's just not honest to real life. And applying that same logic to this movie would have just completely killed it. Oh, by the way, you can catch my directorial debut on Tubi for free. Of course, people want more of Superbad, so there's naturally been conversation about a sequel, with Christopher Mintz-Plasse being open to it.
I want to do it when we're like 45, and like we're all like, we miss each other, and we like all have kids, and some people are losers, and we take a vacation together and like all take acid in the woods.
And Jonah Hill said he'd even do it too, when they're 80 years old. Michael Cera, on the other hand, says it's best left untouched.
I think that everybody is pretty staunchly against this, just because we feel good about the movie. It could only tarnish something that is a good memory.
Superbad created so many careers and launched quite a few insane career trajectories, but no one has had a more insane career journey than Seth MacFarlane. The guy behind Family Guy, Ted, and American Dad. But the craziest part is that back in 2001, he was minutes away from death, and none of this ever happening. I take you on this incredible journey here.